excused.
Mr. Myers? Here. Mr. Miller's here. Mrs. Stellini?
Here.
Mr. Zorn?
Excused.
Mr. Riley?
Here.
And Mrs. Allen?
Excused. Next item, please.
Next item is 1.05, approval of agenda.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Stellini, support by Mr. Miller. Is that correct?
Mr. Myers.
Mr. Myers, to approve the agenda as printed. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Next item, please.
2.01, audience participation.
Anyone wish to address the board tonight? There is none. Next item, please.
3.01, superintendent position interviews.
Okay, as you well know, we are in a second round of interviews. We have asked 2 of the 3 candidates that we interviewed last time to return for a second interview. Tonight's meeting will be for the board to make a decision as to whether we will recommend them to move into a third interview, which would be a town hall meeting with staff, community members, the community at large. And so that's the purpose of our meeting tonight. In front of you, you have a list of questions. You should have 2 sets, one for each candidate. And I wasn't 100% sure who all was going to be able to make this meeting at the time that we had it, so they're not assigned. But what I would like to do, if we could, is just start with question number 1 with Mr. Honeycutt, and then number 2 would go to Mrs. Stellini, 3 would go to myself, 4 would go to Mr. Miller, 5 would go to Mr. Myers, and then we just repeat Mr. Honeycutt, Mrs. Stellini, Mr. Riley, Mr. Miller, Mr. Myers, back to Mr. Honeycutt, to Mrs. Stellini, to Mr. Riley, to Mr. Miller, to Mr. Myers, and then Mr. Honeycutt would have 1 extra question to ask. When we bring the candidate in, I thought it would be a good idea for him to reintroduce himself, since we do have board members as well as audience members that were not at the first interview, so they would be able to know who he is, a little bit about him. So any questions about how that will happen? Okay.
So we have an opportunity to ask follow-up questions.
We will.
And an opportunity to ask questions at the end that weren't on here.
Yes. 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 Just bear in mind, if you remember, we were instructed that if we ask one candidate, we need to keep that consistent. So if you have an extra question, put that down, write that down, but then also remember to ask that question the second time as well. Okay. So, the first candidate will be Mr. Alexander McNeece. Mr. McNeece, welcome back. I believe you know most of the board members, but let me introduce you. Mr. Honeycutt, Mrs. Stellini, Mr. Riley, this is Mr. Miller, and Mr. Myers. And this is Alexander McNeece. And we're going to ask you, if you would, please just reintroduce yourself. We have some board members and some audience members that weren't at the first interview. And so if you would just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll go through about 16 questions, and we'll just rotate around asking questions. At the end, we may have additional questions that were prompted from your answers, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to share anything you would like to, or to ask us some questions at the end. So, okay, there's a bottle of water there, and I believe there's a set of questions in front of you. So.
Well, my name is Alex McNeece. Currently, I'm the Curriculum Director for Garden City Public Schools, where I do all of the curriculum and state and federal grants. I have applied for a superintendent position. I'm very excited about potentially filling that position. The one thing that I really want to reiterate, and it's how I started last time, is that my main focus on everything is trying to bring it back to why we're here, and that's focus on increasing student achievement and making sure that that stays as our #1 focus. I'll attempt to tie my answers back in and try to frame them in that way, because that is the most important thing. That's why we're here. Okay. Short and sweet. There we go.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mr. Honeycutt, if you'll begin with the question.
All right. Question number 1, how important in using the staff already on board to you? And then the second part would be, would you be confident, trust, delegating tasks to others?
Well, I don't actually bring any staff with me to the district. I do know a few of your central office staff members and a few of your teachers, but essentially my job is to come in and facilitate and work together with everyone and start building a coalition that of course reflects on student learning. So I really don't have any staff necessarily on board with me. I realize I'm going to have to win them over, and I plan to do that. If, depending on when the timeline for being hired is, meeting with the entire staff, teachers, support staff, everybody, and addressing them directly, and then talking to them about what my focus is and why I want to, and what I want to create in the district, which again is being a very student-centered focus. Am I confident to trust delegating tasks to others? As a superintendent, you don't check a single paper. You know, you don't read a single textbook to a class. You are constantly delegating. It's something that you have to be comfortable with. And when you delegate, you have to make sure that you build up the people around you and make them better. That's another big goal that leadership should bring to the table. They should attempt to make the others better around them. There is no way one person in this district and one hire is going to change everything. But the people in there, you change the people, you develop the leadership, the teachers, everyone coming together focused on one thing. Essentially, that's what I do. So you have to delegate. I am a delegator.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a follow-up to that. You said that you don't bring staff with you, but you do know staff in central office and teachers in the district. Would you mind letting us know who you do know in the district and how you know them?
I'm not going to necessarily, I don't want to refer to my teacher friend. I just want to make sure that he's kept anonymous. He's a childhood friend of mine that we grew up together, and I talked to him at length in preparation for this event. But your administrative staff having to do with your curriculum department are people that I've worked with before, been in professional development in each of them, all four in the curriculum department. Many of them have reputations far beyond that of Taylor Public Schools. So these are people that I've worked with and collaborated with before, who I potentially could be friends with on Facebook. About it.
What is your vision for the Taylor schools, and how long would it take?
That's a very interesting question. And I don't want to break out the transition plan just yet. But a superintendent's job is really to be a steward of the wishes of the public. So my vision would be to go, and as I would be hired, work in the schools and in the community, having visioning meetings and talking about what is our strategic plan that we will build over the next 4 or 5 years. Essentially, my vision for Taylor is to develop this plan that the community stakeholders want, which is all, again, framed around students and their success. Because I'm willing to guess none of your stakeholders want to see the kids do poorly. They want to see them do better. We have to develop how and what we want to see happen in our schools and then implement that. And that's my job. How long would it take? You set a plan like that up to go 4 or 5 years, and we have incremental steps that we are all, the board and the superintendent, accountable to achieve. And we focus on doing that. We're all human, and things will happen. We won't hit elements of that plan, and so you constantly go back and you revise how you need to improve, what we did, how we can do it better, and what we did well.
How do you do that in your current job?
My entire focus in Garden City, again, has been focusing in on student achievement. And how to do that, job number 1 is developing what we call professional learning communities. Now, there's usually like an asterisk after that. I mean, it's essentially using data and the research of what's worked in the collaborative groups of the teachers of their subject areas and their content areas, and developing ways that'll work for our kids, and holding each other mutually accountable for getting those done. This, everyone across the board, every national writer on education, the American Federation of Teachers, everybody says this is how you improve education. Essentially, that's been my goal there. Developing this collaborative mindset, working in time in the day to make sure this would happen, and growing the people around me to increase student achievement. There's not a teacher that comes in wanting to be a C- teacher. There isn't a principal that comes in wanting to be a C- principal, and there's not a board that wants to be a C- board. You guys all want to see the kids do better. Well, you have to look at the data, you have to determine what you've done well and what you haven't done well, and you need to double down on what you did well. You need to develop new ways. You need to get better. You need to develop skill in the areas that you're weak. And the only way to do that is with the data and the research and the time people work together in a team. So essentially, that's been my entire goal. schools. I passed out some data last time about the writing day where I showed how we made all these really neat graphs. We showed where all our teachers were at. We showed what skills we were good at. And that's essentially what we use, that data, to develop our process, to pull research, to help train the staff on what we needed to do. The writing gains in Garden City have been double digit.